This is the Resistance Report for June 12th, 2017. Good evening. We are also on podcast, I want to remind you, and if you have any suggestions, contact us at contact@inequalitymedia.org. The theme tonight, and we do try to give you themes, we try to pull together the news of the day to give you context. The theme today is one of duty, loyalty. Whom is it that people in public office have responsibility to? Is it to their boss or is it to the public? I think it should not be doubtful. There should be no doubt that the responsibility is to the public, not to the immediate boss. Now, I've attended a lot of cabinet members, a lot of cabinet meetings. I was a member of a cabinet, Bill Clinton's cabinet. I have never been asked by a president, and I was never asked by Bill Clinton to sing his praises before the cameras in a kind of loyalty test. Trump's cabinet meeting today, however, departed from anything I have ever witnessed or seen. We're getting a little fancy, aren't we, with the Resistance Report? We have a picture up here of Trump's cabinet, just so that you can focus on them, because what they did today essentially was take part in the kind of loyalty ritual you would expect from a third world tin pan dictatorship. I mean, that's what dictators do. They go around for the cameras and expect their top officers to say how wonderful they are personally. It's all about them personally. But Trump did it today. And he did it in a very patent and obvious way. It started out with a big lie. Here was what Trump said. He said, "I will say that never has there been a president, with few exceptions, in the case of FDR, he had a major depression to handle, who's passed more legislation, who's done more things than we've done. We've been about as active as you can possibly be and at a just about record-setting pace." That is Donald Trump today. A bold-faced lie. A bald-faced lie. I mean, in fact, Trump has not signed a single piece of major legislation since he took office. Trump Care failed in its first attempt, and it is now completely bogged down in the Senate. He's months away from unveiling, if he ever does unveil, his major tax plan or his infrastructure plan. And then he went around the cabinet and asked everybody around that table in front of the cameras, and this was so obviously for the cameras. This wasn't a cabinet meeting. This was for the cameras. He asked them each to state their name and say something, and obviously it was pre-rehearsed in the sense that Trump knew and expected that each of them would sing his praises. And so Ben Carson, the housing secretary, says, "It's a great honor to work for Donald Trump." And Sonny Perdue, the agricultural secretary, says he offers Trump congratulations for the men and women you've gathered around this table. Slightly self-referring praise. And Reince Priebus told Trump, "We thank you for the opportunity and the blessing to serve your agenda." And I could go on and on. It is slightly revolting, is it not? Now, the cabinet's statement around that table today were in keeping with what the White House is trying to do, a desperate attempt, not only to counter Comey's bad testimony last week and the bad press that Trump got out of that testimony, but also to buck up Trump's own support, his own ego, his own mood. Now, tomorrow, Attorney General Jeff Sessions is going to testify before the Senate Committee on Intelligence, and that's going to be more about the Russian connection. I don't even know why they asked Sessions to testify. Sessions has already committed perjury before the Senate, and he hasn't even been held accountable for that perjury. You would think that at the very least the Senate would hold him accountable by not inviting him back to possibly commit more perjury. My question, though, is do these cabinet members, including Jeff Sessions, do they have no shame at all? I mean, are they so ambitious that they will say absolutely anything in order to keep their jobs? Don't they know that their duty is to the American people? It is not to Donald Trump. That is a fundamentally important understanding, especially when you have somebody like Donald Trump at the helm. Which gets us to a man named Mark Kasowitz. Mark Kasowitz. He is right there. Hello, Mark Kasowitz. Mark Kasowitz, in case you don't know, he is a New York litigator who represented Donald Trump for 15 years. In business, I mean, he was the Roy Cohn of Donald Trump's business empire, and he boasts, this Mark Kasowitz, of being called the toughest lawyer on Wall Street. Now, the reason I bring him up, he's still Trump's lawyer. I mean, even right now, even to this day. Worse yet, he is boasting of gaining power and prominence in the White House, and it is more than a boast. He actually is gaining power, and he is gaining prominence in the White House. In fact, there's even talk that he's going to have his own office in the White House. In recent days, according to two separate sources reported today, Kasowitz has advised White House aides to discuss the inquiry into Russia's interference in last year's election as little as possible. In other words, Kasowitz is calling the shots in the White House with regard to the Russian connection. His only loyalty, I want to just remind you of this. This is the problem. It's the same problem I alluded to a moment ago. But Kasowitz is even more a problem because Kasowitz's only loyalty, his only responsibility, is to the man he worked for the past 15 years. Donald Trump and obviously Trump's business. Not to the people of the United States, not to the American public. Why should he have an office in the White House? Why should he have clearance to the White House? Why should he be in the White House? Why should he be representing Donald Trump? He is a private litigator who only has the interests of Donald Trump at heart. Ditto for Donald Trump himself. Ditto for Jared Kushner and Ivanka. They're there in the White House. They have White House clearance. They have security clearances. And their only loyalty is to Donald Trump and Donald Trump's businesses. This has all of the accoutrements and qualities of what you expect in a two-bit dictatorship, in terms of people who are surrounding a president who only are watching his back and are not there for the American people. But let me remind you, we are in a democracy. The Constitution of the United States says the president and presumably everybody he hires is to work for us, not for him or for his selfish motives. Trump has a duty to the nation, not to make money off of his office. Which brings me to the attorneys general for the District of Columbia and the state of Maryland. And there they are. Aren't we? We are very technologically advanced here at the Resistance Report. Don't worry, we're not going to get too professional. But the attorneys general, two of them, the plural of attorney general is attorneys general. The attorney general, both for the District of Columbia and the attorney general for the state of Maryland, what they did, and I think they deserve a lot of credit, is that they are filing a lawsuit against Trump, charging him with violating the anti-bribery provision in the Constitution, which is known as the Emoluments Clause. I mean, people are confused. Emoluments may sound to you like a dental adhesive. It's not. It is an anti-bribery clause. It means that no president of the United States, no top official, can take bribes from foreign governments that lead that official to do something that official may do that is not in the interest of the American people. And Donald Trump is raking in all of this money from Trump International Hotel. Well, now these two courageous attorneys general are taking Donald Trump to court, and they're standing. The issue of standing, that is, why do they have a right to appear in court? What they're saying, and it makes some sense to me, is that Donald Trump's attracting business to the Trump International Hotel is taking business away from other hotels and conference centers and convention centers that are publicly subsidized in Washington, D.C. and in the state of Maryland. And the Maryland taxpayers and the Washington, D.C. taxpayers are therefore losing money to Donald Trump and the Trump Hotel. Now, the Justice Department, or maybe his personal lawyer, Trump's personal lawyer, are going to take this presumably all the way to the Supreme Court if the federal court finds that Trump has violated the Emoluments Clause, is getting bribes from foreign governments. But that's okay in the following sense, even though it drags on for a while, because of this very important fact. In the discovery phase of this court case, by discovery phase, I mean it's the first phase, once they're granted standing to sue, assuming they are granted standing to sue, then these two attorneys general can seek documents from Donald Trump that might help prove their case against him in terms of taking foreign bribes. One of the most important documents they're going to try to seek is Donald Trump's tax returns. This is a backdoor, and it is a backward way of getting Donald Trump's tax returns. Obviously, if he had had the responsibility to the American public to do what every other president has done in modern years, in recent memory, to provide his tax returns when he ran for president, we wouldn't have to go through this rigmarole. But that's going to be very important. I want to keep your eye peeled on that. But it gets to the most basic point of all, and that is this. We now have Comey's testimony last week. We have a lot of other evidence with regard to the Trump International Hotel. We've got impeachment with regard to, and the grounds for impeachment. We've got obstruction of justice, abuse of power, the Emoluments Clause. They're all impeachable offenses. This was the basis for the impeachment of Richard Nixon. It was the basis for the House impeachment, at least, of Bill Clinton. But it's even more basic here. Donald Trump arguably has violated his most fundamental oath of office, which is to uphold this document, the Constitution of the United States, to protect our democracy. Now, here's what we know. Every major intelligence agency, in fact, every intelligence agency in the United States, the FBI, the NSA, all of them have said that there is no doubt that Russia interfered in the 2016 presidential election. But instead of being commander-in-chief, instead of protecting our democracy, instead of protecting our Constitution, what does Donald Trump do? He is going out of his way to do everything he can possibly do to prevent us from knowing more about this Russian attack on our democracy. I mean, if Russia had attacked us with bombs instead of bots, we would demand that we know everything. And if Trump had tried to prevent us from knowing about the Russian attack with bombs, we would hold him up for treason, would we not? Well, this is exactly the same thing. It's not bombs, but it might as well be bombs in the sense that it is a direct attack on our democracy, the most precious part of what Donald Trump is supposed to be protecting. So in addition to obstruction of justice, in addition to the Emoluments Clause violation, in addition to abuse of power, we have Donald Trump's failure to uphold his oath of office to protect this document and to protect American democracy. Don't forget that that is really the essence of the issue here. And now for your questions. Sean Gardner-Turner, I wonder why economics and the economic history of the United States is not required learning in our education system. What do you think? Sean, I'm with you. You're pushing on an open door. I have been arguing for years that we need better economic education and also economic history. You can't understand our political economy unless you understand where we have been economically, and you can't understand what's happening right now unless you understand that starting in the late 70s, early 1980s, the American economy kept on growing, but most people's wages began to flatten, and most of the gains from economic growth started to go to the top. And that generated enormous, growing anger, suspicion, hostility, feeling that the game was rigged in favor of people at the top. And where do you get to with that anger and that hostility? Well, eventually, if you don't do anything about it, if you don't do anything about the underlying problem, you get to Donald Trump. And you get to more demagogues like Donald Trump. Stephanie Stockman, can you explain the UK election? Stephanie, I can explain the UK election very easily. A lot of commentators are saying, well, how can it possibly be? I mean, first of all, we had Brexit, and then we had Le Pen, and then we have Trump, or we had Brexit, and then Trump and Le Pen, and we thought it was all going to be clear, but now we have a reaction against Theresa May, and Jeremy Corbyn, who's on the left, is coming up. How can that be? Scratching your head. Well, let me explain. It's very simple. What actually connects all these dots, that is Brexit and Trump and Le Pen doing much better than expected, and Jeremy Corbyn doing much better than expected, and basically Theresa May not having the authority anymore in a hung parliament to get anything done. What connects all these dots is this anti-establishment fervor in the public in Europe and in the United States. Anti-establishment, anti-business as usual. Because people are so angry. Finally, Barbara Siegler. I've heard that less people are calling their representatives. Fewer people are calling their representatives. Please remind everyone to keep it up. It's not over yet. Barbara, absolutely. It is summer. People are tired. We've had 4.5 months of Trump. People are exhausted. They're numbed by the outrage day after day. They read it and they just... In fact, I've had people come up to me and say, I can't read the paper anymore. I can't listen to the news. I'm just over it. I just can't do it. I understand that. Believe me, I understand it. I just came back from Washington. I spent most of last week in Washington, and I was just, being in Washington is even worse than reading about Washington. I mean, being in Washington is like, I would walk along the streets and people would have long faces, and they would, the mood in Washington is a combination of jubilation and dread. I mean, jubilation that after Comey's testimony, we seem to be moving into a new phase, and dread about what Trump will do next. So I get it. But nothing good happens in Washington, even if there are good people there. And there are still good people in Washington. But nothing good happens in Washington. I know this unless good people outside Washington put pressure and keep the pressure on Washington. So you are needed more than any time before. You need to pace yourself. You need to have a little fun. You need to have some downtime, yes. But you also need to keep up the fight. I'm going to put up these people, these websites, indivisibleguide.com and also swingleft.org. And there are 2 others, sisterdistrict.com, still being built, and runforsomething.net. These are critically important. Can you see them? Make note. Get involved. Take time off in the weekend, but every day devote 5 or 10 minutes to the practice of citizenship politics, of citizen activism. Will you do that? Okay. Now, some of you wondered about where are the jokes. I asked you last week for some jokes. Well, we were so inundated with jokes. We're still looking for the perfect joke. The perfect joke. So keep them coming. And again, where to send your jokes? The best place to send the jokes, if you want the jokes to be actually read, is to what I read initially. I had it down. That is contact@inequalitymedia.org. That's the end for tonight. Producer Yael Bridge, I want to thank Yael, and also associate producer Sasha Lightman. I want to thank Sasha. Thank all of you. Keep up the fight. We'll see you tomorrow.